meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jami Kaeb, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. All right. Well, Brittany, I am so honored to have you on the show today. And I want to give a little context to our audience and our listeners before we begin and we really dive into your story. But you have 4 children and ages around 5 months, your baby to 13. Now, you have both been placed into foster care as a child yourself. And later, as an adult, you've actually had children taken into foster care of your own. So you have a very unique perspective that is so important for us to hear. But I want to make sure that we say it doesn't end there.
It does not.
It does not, right? There is hope. There is always hope. And you have experienced the hope and the salvation of Jesus Christ. And He is what fills you up today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, isn't it wonderful that our stories don't end with our brokenness and our struggle?
Before I found Jesus, I just thought there was no hope, but I know now that Proverbs 3:5-6 is the truth. I cannot lean on my own understanding because I will fail every time. So, Amen.
Trust in the Lord with all thy heart. I love that verse as well. It is a life-giving verse. Like you said, it's true and it's hope and it's kind of where it's all at. And I'm so grateful. Brittany, will you start by just telling us about your childhood, some of your early memories, some of your early experiences?
Okay. So, I think this might be a little harder than I thought. So, growing up, my mom was 13 whenever she had me. My grandparents, they went through all the classes and everything that they could to adopt me. On my 6th birthday, my mother was murdered. She was pregnant. And then a year later, my 3 brothers was all taken into custody, and I never seen them again until, well, that's later on. We'll get to that part. But, and
can I pause here? I just want to say, I am so, so sorry. I cannot imagine that. I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was really hard.
Oh my goodness.
And as a child, I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. So, it wasn't something that we talked about. I didn't want them to feel sorry for me because I didn't have a mommy, because my grandma, she did a really good job raising me. My grandma, my grandpa. My grandpa, he taught me, he said, always count your pennies. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and never depend on a man.
That's funny that Grandpa said that.
Yeah. So, and I lived by that, but that's whenever I started masking my emotions, masking any of my feelings, because I just didn't want people to feel sorry for me. And it wasn't until probably a few years later that it, because they took me to the graveside anytime I wanted to talk to my mom or, if I just felt sad, it was a thing we always went and did. I had a great childhood. My family, they loved me. I'd never hurted for anything. So I didn't grow up in drug addiction or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I was like 13, I went buck wild, and, I wanted to sneak out and all that fun stuff as, a teenager would think.
Right.
And so that's whenever I tried marijuana, and I liked it a lot. And a few years later, I was pregnant with my daughter. My kids' father, he was really into meth. And so like I was curious why he kept leaving me to go get high, why he kept leaving me, like what was so good about this drug. And after I had my daughter, Brooklyn, I tried meth, and I liked that too. And then I started exploring with Xanax, and I liked that. And then it wasn't just for doing it for fun anymore. Then I started, I realized how much money I could make by selling drugs. And that is where my life fell apart. I was completely strung out. I had abandoned my kids basically just because I thought I was protecting them. And, but really I was just abandoning them. And I realized that at the time, but now looking back at all of it and like, it's just really hard to even admit that, I chose all of that over my children. And then, so that's when prison came about. I was in and out of jail. So I was in Polk County Jail and Freeway Ministries. I don't know if you're familiar with Freeway Ministries. Okay, so Freeway Ministries is thebomb.com.
Yes.
They reach the hard to reach. They reach the people that people don't want to touch, So they would come in, the women would come to the women's side, the men would go into the men's side, and they would share the gospel with us. And I remember hearing a testimony for the first time. It was actually Amber Nichols. She shared her testimony, and I could relate to it. And I said, wow, there is hope. There is hope.
That was the first time you thought that there might be something more.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like just seeing the joy of Jesus in her, I was like, I want to be like her, a kid's like, I want to be like her when I grow up. Well, that's how I felt. I wasn't grown up yet. I was still being a kid. I was still being immature. And so the next time I went to jail, which was probably like a year later, I had already been to prison twice. I was on my way for a third time. And that is when in between that, my oldest brother found me on Facebook. And I remember being in prison, and, whenever you go to treatment or whatever, they try to dig at you and they try to ask all these questions. And you're like, I don't want to talk about any of that, because I hadn't talked about any of it. I didn't realize that my hurt and my addiction to love was because I felt abandoned by my mother and my brothers. And, that's why I cling to love so much, is because when I love hard. Yeah. And so I guess I kind of went a little too far. I'm sorry.
No, you're great. No, you're doing awesome, Brittany. And I will stop you if I want to. But we're going to pause right there after you said, when I love hard. Wow, there's so many things that I first just appreciate you being so vulnerable. What I wrote down was that it was through the power of story and someone sharing their story and the joy that came from them, of Jesus, that changed your life. And Brittany, I truly believe that your story is going to change someone's, maybe many people's lives, because you're willing to share. So I just want you to know that. I want to ask you, way back when you said you put on the mask, do you remember, was there like a thought of like, I can't let people know because this or that? Or was it just like this almost like without thinking you put on the mask, or was there a reason you feel like how it seems so bad for people to feel sorry for you?
I don't really know why it came about. I just know that, like I went to school as I was in kindergarten, and I just remember going to school and like people knew it was like the talk of the school and my classroom. And, I don't know. I guess I just automatically put it on because I didn't want to be known as the girl who lost her whole in a blink of an eye.
Well, and no one wants to be different, right? No one wants to be different and talked about. You just want to blend in when you're a kid, and there's safety in that. Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. One thing you said when you really enjoyed, like, did you feel the drugs and the different things? Did you feel like once you went from marijuana to meth, did you go back to marijuana, or was it just a continued progression, kind of deeper, deeper, deeper?
Yeah, it was. I never stopped smoking marijuana. Marijuana was always like my number one go-to. But like I could get like the energy and like the calmness with both of them. And I just really liked it. Like I can honestly, and that's like the power of the drugs is you remember the good times. You remember, you don't remember the bad times. You don't remember the times whenever you're alone and your friends don't want to talk to you because you don't have no drugs to sell them. You don't remember any of that. You just remember like, man, I felt good. Man, nothing mattered then, But looking back at where I am now and looking back, all I see is hurt, pain, heartbrokenness, death. I lost a lot of friends last year. I lost like 9 close friends to heroin.
Oh my.
And I'm still losing friends, but where I am now is I'm able to set them boundaries and not care what they think. And that's like the huge step of my recovery is being selfish in that. And that's one thing you can't care about, what's my friends going to think? And like, who cares? Like, I look at it like, well, people follow me. So maybe if I'm doing good and they see Jesus looks good on me and I'm able to turn it around after everything I lost, God healed every bit of that brokenness. And, that's where the hope is.
Amen. Amen. I love it. So, I know we're digging in right now to a lot of the hard parts of your story, but was it when you were in prison that your kids were removed, or kind of how did that come about?
Okay. So the last time I went to prison, which was in 2019, which is the year I got saved, I fully gave my life to Jesus in the dirty jail cell county.
A dirty jail cell. That's amazing. Yes.
And was actually the one who led me to Jesus. And I'll never forget her. I love her. She's still one of my dear friends. So I go to prison and I'm there for a while. The judge set me down. Right. So backing up though a little bit before that. So whenever I first found like this hope in Jesus, I was looking at 15 years in prison, and I was set down for like a month. I ended up having a miscarriage while I was in jail, right? And so I go in front of the judge, and he was getting ready to lay me down. He was going to run my charges consecutive, which is different. So that's why it added up to 15 years. But whenever I went back to court, he actually lowered my sentence to like 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, that's another thing that I was like, I think that was God that did that. Because the judge was already tired of my stuff. He'd been seeing me. And every time I went in front of him, he's like, Brittany, what are you doing? You do not belong in this world. And I'm like, whatever, just send me to prison, blah, 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 Anyways, so I go to prison later on because I end up going on the run, of course. That's what I would do. I would get out, go on the run, go to prison. It was like this repeating cycle for like 3 years. So 2019, I go, And then I remember getting this paperwork in the mail from Children's Division because my daughters had been with their father, and he had been in prison for like 7 years flat. And I'd always told him, I'm like, being a dad over the phone is easier than being a dad in person. And I'm not trying to knock him or anything, because he tried, but he ended up getting our kids taken away. He let them see too much. He let them do too much. And it's like, I don't even know what happened. It was like different kids. So they end up getting taken, but they're not taken. They're just in custody, right? And so that's whenever I made a decision while I was in prison. I was like, something's got to change. Something has to change. And it was random, but I get moved to this honor wing because of the whole COVID situation, right? And I meet Flo, and she introduces me, through the phone, she introduces me to Charla Stroop, which is the director of the Women's House at Freeway Ministries. And I kind of gave her a little bit of my story, wrote her a letter, and she approved me within 2 weeks. She approved me. She, and that's where I went when I got out of prison. Wow. And I'm fighting this case. So, okay, I'm doing the program, right? Like, they're basically teaching me how to be Christ-like. That morning routine of getting in your Bible, leaning on your church, leaning on your sisters in Christ, and just like raising me up, like teaching my baby Christian self how to walk.
Yes.
And so I ended up leaving in April, May 2020, right? And that's when I leaned on my own understanding. I left for a guy, and by this time, my kids are at the first placement, because when I got out of prison, I ended up moving them down here to Springfield, so we could be closer, and we can go to church and raise them up in the church and stuff like that. So they're still in the first placement. I left the program, instantly relapsed, instantly. And then I quit answering the phone, because all I seen in myself was failing. Yeah. I seen a failure. I seen a mother that wasn't worth a hoot. And, I was like, if I can't get clean for my kids, what am I going to do? So I just gave up, and I went even more buck wild. And then, so my kids end up getting switched to a different home. And then that's how they ended up with the Cunninghams. And that's where this story takes a complete 360. So I'm really, really far from my addiction. I end up pregnant with my son. Obviously, relapse, sin. So there's that. Yeah. And so Christy had reached out to me to have a visit at my aunt's house with the girls. This is the first time Brooklyn had seen her sisters, because she was at my cousin's house. And
so the kids are separated. Okay.
Yeah, they were separated. Sorry, I forgot that part.
Oh, that's okay.
And so this was the first time Brooklyn had seen her sisters in months. I mean, a lot of months. And I remember looking over at Christy, and she's talking to my daughter, Brooklyn. And I remember thinking, what is this woman? What is her motive? What is she up to? And in that moment, she was promising my daughter, Brooklyn, that she would be home with her sisters before Christmas. And God willing, that happened. So that was her motive.
Wow. So how did you start to build this relationship with Christy? And Yeah.
Well,
what are the next steps?
so I'm obviously still using in my pregnancy. I just couldn't stop. It was like everything that was going on. I was working so much and I was just making the excuse, well, I need the energy. And, I was at a place where I couldn't go. So, and I went to my doctor's appointments. I made an oath to myself. I said, even if you're dirty, you're still going to go to the doctor. Because with Maddie, I didn't do that. I completely abandoned the doctor, and I knew where that ended up. So I was like, I'm not doing that again. And so there was a scare of Noah possibly having Down syndrome. And I was like devastated. I mean, completely devastated. Someone asked me, they said, are you going to be able to handle that? And I couldn't answer the question because I don't think I could have. I mean, honestly, I was just completely devastated. I was like, I've completely ruined my baby already, so all this guilt and all this shame was coming.
Yeah.
And it was just even worse because I knew that I was about to have a TPR with my daughters. So Christy reached out to me and she said, hey, I want you to know that I have experience with, babies with Down syndrome. My brother has Down syndrome. And so she's like, I'll be willing to, help you. And I was like, okay, so that was duly noted. And so I think it was New Year's Eve, maybe. So she had been consistent. This is when Brooklyn was moved back in with her or moved in with her. And
so just so we get make sure we're tracking here, the 3 girls are with Christy. Is that right? Yes. At this point? And when you said TPR, explain to our listeners who might not know, a lot of them will. A lot of our listeners are foster parents, but there might be a few who are new to this. So what do you mean by that?
So a TPR is termination of the parental rights. Yeah. So that means my rights are completely terminated for my kids. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, my kids are in a better place. It was I kind of knew it was coming and I was almost not really at peace with it, but I was like, okay, this is going to happen and it's happening soon. And nobody at this point in my life knew this was happening.
Okay.
I completely, my family, they're like, what's going on with the girls? And I'm like, everything's fine. Da, 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 da. I wasn't honest with them. So that was a huge shocker. But luckily, Christy, whenever she got Brooklyn, the girls wanted to talk to me and they wanted to reach out to me, and her and Justin's motive was never to take me out of their life. Their motive was to just help with the girls, make them safe, make them, comfortable, lead them to Jesus, it wasn't about me. It was about the kids, which was totally fine. But then Christy got a burden for me, and she, she was praying to God, please give me a burden for this lady, help me help her. Right. And so she sends me a picture, and so she has 4 kids too. Right. And I have 4 kids. So there's a total of 8 kids.
Wow.
All together. Well, 7 because Noah wasn't born yet. So she sends me pictures of, Brooke and her sisters. And I remember seeing, I might get a little emotional. I remember seeing Brooklyn's smile. And I just remember saying to her, thank you for giving my daughter her smile back. Because it'd been so long since I'd seen Brooklyn's real smile. And, so she continued to be consistent with calling me for the girls. She continued to send me encouraging messages hey, I'm thinking of you. I'm praying for you. inviting me to church, and sometimes I would make excuses. Most of the time I wouldn't answer the phone because I would be too high. But she wasn't giving up. She never gave up. And so God used the doctor's appointments, because there was a lot of complications, but he used the doctor's appointments to bring us closer. Because whenever she reached out to me and she said, hey, I have experience. Well, she didn't really word it like that, but that's how I'm wording it. She's I have experience with Down syndrome. So I reached out to her because at this point, I didn't know which way it was going to go with Noah. I didn't know if I was going to get him or I was going to lose him. I didn't know which way it was going to go. So I reached out to her and I said, hey, this might sound a little crazy, but how would you feel about going to the doctor's appointments with me? Because I have no clue what they're telling me. I don't even know. Once they say, hey, and they start speaking, it's like gibberish to me. And plus, I don't know which way it's going to go. And I want you to have a connection with this baby if you get him.
That's got to be hard. How I know that you loved her and appreciated Christy, but still, had to be a sacrifice to say that, was it?
It was hard.
Yeah.
And some days it's still hard.
Yeah. Understandably.
But she is very encouraging and supportive. And we have a great relationship. She's one of my best friends. Awesome. She led me back to Jesus. And she led me back to being a mom. Her and her husband are a great example of what love looks like, what a home looks like, and, what Jesus looks like. So
that's incredible. Brittany, I know this is sensitive, so say as much or as little as you want, but on that day for court, for when they did terminate the rights, can you kind of put us in the courtroom with you? What was that like?
So by this time, I have a complete relationship with the family, with Christy and Justin. I'm in between Justin's mom and Christy's mom.
Wow.
In my arms. And what was the happiest day for them was the hardest day for me. And that's when I masked and I tried to hide. Tears are just coming out of nowhere. I was trying to hold it in. I couldn't. Yeah. And when Christy asked me if I wanted to be a part of it, I was like, I don't know about all that. Because I didn't want it to be about me because I knew what I was going to feel like. And it was the hardest day of my life. But it was also the opening to a new chapter in my life and my daughter's life. So it was crazy.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm in the courtroom and the courtroom is filled with a lot of close friends of Christy and Justin's and the pastor, his wife. It's just filled with support, And it was beautiful, but it was so tragic in the same sense. I couldn't get out of my head. I did that. How do my kids feel right now? How can I be happy in this moment? But that was the day that I learned that it was okay to not be okay. And it was okay to feel that. And I honestly think God used that day to break through. break through me like, okay, Brittany, it's okay to let it go. Like, this is your closure for your mess ups, but you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So thank goodness, like, Christy and Justin are super cool, and they want to co-parent, and like, we co-parent really well. I'm still the girls' mom. You know, Christy's their mom. They got 2 moms. We call ourselves sister moms. And Justin's a great dad to them. He is he's an amazing leader for this family, and I wouldn't have it any other way. God knew what he was doing whenever he sent the Cunningham clan to rescue my kids. So, and now they also rescued me because I'm part of the family. So
that's amazing. Amazing. Now, just to make sure I'm also, when you, on that day, when all the people were there in support, was that the termination day or the adoption day? Or did that happen like at the same time?
I think it happened at the same time, but it was also the adoption day. So like, that's whenever their names went from Marler to Cunningham.
Yeah. Okay.
But Christy didn't want to change their first and middle names. She said that is their names and they won't be changed. Yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So many emotions.
Yeah. So many.
Yeah. Brittany, I really appreciate your vulnerability. I mean, all throughout your story and all throughout sharing with us, and with it being National Adoption Month, we do not hear this side of adoption very often. You know, the side where you have actually had to watch your kids be adopted out. And I love, love, love that Christy and her husband, the Cunninghams, they have been obedient to Jesus and have welcomed you in with open arms. And I guarantee you, Brittany, that, and I'm sure they've said this to you, that you've taught them so much, too.
They often say that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what I could teach you, but
No, I mean, I just believe so deeply. We need each other. All of our experiences, all of our baggage, all of our good pieces of our story, we grow together because we're all broken people. Sometimes we view other people's, quote, brokenness as worse than our brokenness, but that's pretty dangerous, I would say. And so we're all in desperate need of the Savior. And that's why I just think it's beautiful how God has brought restoration and redemption and created this whole entire family unit.
Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah. That's incredible. Brittany, I know that typically after termination of rights, there's a last visit or a final visit. Was that your experience with kids? I know your situation has fortunately been different where you have been able to continue a relationship, but was that still something that they had?
No, because there wasn't a last visit.
Yeah, they didn't need to.
That's why their story is so so powerful, because if it wasn't for God, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
You know, God gave her a burden, which gave her husband a burden, and it's so crazy thinking back. This is kind of completely off topic, but it's crazy to think back. Like, I look back through like my journal, because I journal, and I remember like reading my prayers and like hearing some of her prayers. And it's like God was working when I didn't even see it. He was answering my prayers in his way, not my way, Yes. And I remember praying like, God, please don't let this be my last chance. And please don't let me give up. And he didn't let it be my last chance. And he didn't let me give up. Granted, I didn't get my kids back like I want them back, but I got them back with an amazing support system.
Wow.
Well, I mean, granted, they're still in the Cunningham house, but I mean, it's basically like I'm here every day anyways. So yeah, there was never a last visit.
Wow.
And I'm actually at the Cunninghams right now. Christy set up this.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, God is always working behind the scenes, always. And we just don't know what he's doing always. And like you said, I think that's so real. It's not always the way that we think we want and we hope for. But he is good. He is good all the time. Yeah, when it's hard and when it's good, right?
Yeah.
And he was pursuing you. He never gave up. He is a relentless pursuer, isn't he?
Gosh, it's so overwhelming how good and awesome and unfailing and promising and how real the word is. It's like, if you don't know Jesus, I don't know how you're going to make it. Like, I didn't make it without him. You know, I failed instantly. And it just shows how powerful, it just shows how powerful he is, because without him, I was nothing. I wasn't a mom. I wasn't even really a person. I was just like this dirty, rotten sinner that just wanted to do her own thing. And now, like,
and yet, how did he see you when you viewed yourself as such a dirty, rotten sinner? How did he see you?
He seen me as his child, and he wasn't going to give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I learned in that struggle was struggling doesn't last forever, and God is always on time. So
I love it. Brittany, I know that we have some listeners who are in a similar place that you were, who maybe have kids in the system right now, or maybe have seen their kids be adopted. Maybe they don't have a relationship with them. Would you just speak to other moms who are hurting right now?
Oh man, that touches my heart. Well, you're not alone. And, what I would say to them is reach out to the foster parents. Just reach out. Be willing to change. And don't do it for anybody but yourself first. That way you can be who you are supposed to be for your children. Because your team won't always look at you like a failure. When you turn your life around, they'll turn their hope around in you. So that's what I would say to them. Wow. Don't give up.
Don't give up. Yeah. Wow. Brittany, what'd you say?
I said, and find a church.
Find a church. Yes. Yes. But the good news is that God is pursuing you always. Like Brittany said, even in a jail cell. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, sometimes, you know, like you can look at your situation like, oh, man, this is horrible. Or you can look at it like, all right, what's God saying to me today? You know, like that's how I look at some things now, which is different. Like, and if I would have looked at it then, like, okay, what's God preparing me for? Instead of like, oh, well, here we go again, you know? So, I mean, there's excitement in following Jesus. Like, you know, like the thrill people chase whenever they're doing drugs or whatever. Like the thrill in following Jesus is 10 times better because you never know what he's going to put in front of you. And you never know what it's going to be because he's the way maker. He is the guy in charge. It's not me. It's not anybody else. He has a plan for all of us. And It's basically how we react. We can either react in faithfulness or we can react in disobedience. So, I would choose.
Boom. Yes. I think that says it all, Brittany. Thank you so much for being on our show today and for the light that you're allowing Christ to shine through you. I mean, I cannot wait to see all the people when you get to heaven someday, all the people that come up to you and say, thank you for being that shining light for me.
Yeah. So, and so I'm actually I still have a case with my son.
Okay.
Okay. I just didn't want to leave it there. I'm sorry.
No, that's totally fine.
Okay. Because this is where the hope comes in for others that are going through what was going through. So my team, my division of like social services, that team has never changed. It was the same for my TPR and it's the same for my son now. Okay. And so, and the judge is the same. And, so here's how I did my turnaround. I did what they asked. I did what they asked, but I didn't do it alone. You know, I reach out to them people that God's placed in front of me, whether I'm being vulnerable or I'm mad or I don't know what to say, you know, I reach out to them people that God has placed in front of me and I'm honest with them. I'm honest about it. I go to church every Sunday. I not as obedient as I'd like to be in the mornings with Bible time, but it's a work in progress.
That's
not
right.
Everybody.
That is true.
But what I've learned is whenever you are willing to change and you do what they ask of you, you can't really fail, honestly. That's whenever the ball's in your court. And so I was expecting them to be like, oh, she's a failure, blah, 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 blah. She's had a TPR with her daughters, you know, but they didn't. They've been encouraging the whole time. They've been for reunification this whole time. Wow. And I think that's really cool. Yeah. So Noah is actually also at the Cunningham house. And so Christy took him home from the hospital. Because I was in rehab. I went to rehab right after I had him. And so she took him home. And she's been his mom, too. You know? And I remember whenever I first got approved for overnights, I looked at her and I was like, are you going to be okay with this? Like, you can call me if you feel like you miss him, you know, like, I know this has got to be painful. This is going to be his first time away from you, you know, and I just really cared about like how she felt because she had been his mom. Wow. You know, and like that's where our story's different is because we co-parent really well. I hope this story touches not only mothers that struggle, but foster parents that foster.
Yes.
You know, it's different. Our story is so different that it makes me upset sometimes whenever I hear other stories.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go into detail about that because that's not what this is about. But it makes me upset. And I just wish that more people that fostered could be like Christy and Justin. And because I feel like that's what it's supposed to look like. It's, you know. So that's been my prayer a lot. Especially for the girls at my outpatient class, like that are going through what I'm going through. Like I pray for them and I'm just like, God, please just change their foster parents' hearts. Because it's a lot of emotions built into one cycle and it's not one-sided.
Yeah, absolutely.
it's definitely not one-sided. You know, just like in the courtroom, what was an amazing day for them was a horrible day for me.
Yeah.
Horrible. But God used that to strengthen our relationship.
Right.
To show me that He is faithful and that Christy and Justin are always going to be loyal as friends, as co-parents, and that it's not about them. It's not about me. It's about our children. We now get to raise together. So,
wow. Thank you for sharing that.
sorry.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for being on again. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.